I am putting myself at arm because I'm sharing the space with cars. I mean, there are segregated bicycle lanes that I can use, but that's not across the whole city. I need to kind of limit the risk that I'm going to take. And that's not the kind of the mindset you want to have. What is the best option for me? And I think that's the dilemma that I face.
And it's not the Hunger Games, right? It should not be the Hunger Games about whether you survive or whether you make it at the end. For example, when my Dutch friends come to Berlin or when my Danish friends come to Berlin, they don't feel safe cycling. It almost freaks them out, you know? And this is things that we can easily change, especially address those needs who are not cycling yet. And why are they not cycling yet? And what do we have to provide for them to cycle? And not in an ideological sense again, to say like, you have to cycle, it's good for the environment. No, it is just good for yourself. It's good for your well-being.
Welcome to another episode of the Ride to Success podcast, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a more productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. I'm your host, Pedro Couto Lopez. You can find me on LinkedIn under my own name, and in the podcast I explore cycling's global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to have Isabell Eberlein as our guest. Isabell is a CEO of Velokonzept. She's a passionate advocate for sustainable mobility and a driving force behind initiatives like Women in Cycling. Her journey from studying political science and energy policy to becoming a leader in the cycling advocacy is both inspiring and thought-provoking. We will dive into Isabell's personal story, her work, and a relentless effort to foster diversity and inclusion within the cycling industry. Whether you are a cycling enthusiast, an advocate for sustainability, or someone looking to actionable insights to implement into your company and create meaningful change, this episode has something for you. But before we get into the podcast, I have a huge favor to ask you. If you like what you listen, please consider subscribing or following the podcast. It helps me to continue to bring you amazing conversations like this one, and I'll be forever grateful. Now, back to the show. Welcome, Isabell, to Ride to Success. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Hi, Pedro. Nice to be on the podcast.
The bicycle is really more than just a means of transport. It's a symbol of social transformation, of liberation, progress. And I'm kind of interested to know more about you as a person, the story of what inspired you to be interested in cycling and also in sustainability. What was there a moment? How was that journey to be interested in this field, also sustainable mobility?
Yeah, thanks, Pedro, for the question. I think the short answer, it's a process, and it was not as one moment, but it was very much in retro perspective now, it all makes sense. But when I was in the process, it didn't make so much sense. First of all, I was trained to be a political scientist, and I was very much interested in society, political system, transformation, change, all these things. But I was very much looking at the energy sector. Because at this time at university, 15 years ago, we were discussing about the energy transition in Germany, about shifting to renewables, about getting rid of fossil fuels. And I was not aware of mobility at all. It was also not part of our studies yet. Not so much, at least. And then I went abroad to study in the Netherlands and to study environmental governance. And I was also at this time very much an activist, you know, a person who wants to make society for the better, a naive person who wants to live in a better place. And in the Netherlands, I discovered that cycling is a very cool mode of everyday mobility. And I also reminded myself that when I was a kid and I was living in rural Bavaria, that it was my mode of transport that gave me independence. And in the Netherlands, it was just, it was just normal. It was the default. And it was nothing to worry about. I got a 50 euro bike, probably stolen. And it was a shitty bike, but it got me everywhere. And I didn't even know how to figure out public transport there because I was basically using the bike all the day, every day. Returning to Berlin, I figured out, why don't we have it? What are the systemic what is the system behind? Why don't we change it? And it was also the time in Germany when there was a lot of change in political system. Again, as you say, the bicycle as a vehicle for transformation, so personal, societal, all kind of transformation. And I became also here an activist first, who lobbied for a mobility law in Berlin that obliged the state of Berlin or the city of Berlin to build bicycle infrastructure, to build bicycle racks and all of these things. And that's almost 10 years ago. And then only I started, I finished my studies. I was looking for a job. I entered the public transport mobility sector. It's very slow. And I figured, okay, I have to have something quicker. And then I entered the bicycle industry. And at the beginning, it was really shocking because it was full of this mammals, full of this lycra people who are, going on 35 kilometers an hour speed. And it was not so much about the everyday cyclists. It was very much about the sport nerds. And I also think that some things also have changed in this industry, how we perceive bikes within the last 10 years. And it became very much my playground where I can, where I can do a lot of things and what I love is working together with all kind of different stakeholders, still with this political realm, but also with the industry people, with building all kind of different platforms, bringing people together. And in fact, bringing the bicycle as this mode of transport, as the sport vehicle. I just, started sport cycling last year, and all these different facets of the bicycle. And that's how I got there. But maybe to start with.
It sounds like an amazing journey. Like you have been, sounds like a lot of that has happened since leaving university. And I'm interested in delving a bit more into that, because were you at a point involved, like in being part of a political party?
Never. I was never part of a political party, and I still have troubles deciding to become part of a political party. And it became also difficult. I'm very much talking from a German perspective. And I feel that cycling has become political, but it also became ideological. And I mean, I'm wearing this green jacket because it happens to be my favorite color, but it is very much a problem that cycling is associated, in Germany at least, only with the Green Party, and that the conservative parties and that even the social democratic parties, they don't see it as a mode of transport. They don't acknowledge it. They even fight it, and they make election campaigns for car drivers, and they very much also fuel this ideological fight. And for me, it always had been, I want to push the topic beyond parties, beyond ideological interests and conflicts and so ever. It's become more and more challenging and more frustrating that this topic is really seen as these tofu eating green people who only ride bikes. And I want to have it like in the Netherlands, where it's just convenient and everyone does it, and it's not an ideological situation to ride a bike or not.
It's so interesting. I think there is people in the UK can resonate.
Let me tell a joke, because at the moment we're in election in Germany, and we are always, media is joking, asking the Conservative Party if they know any person who is not intelligent at all who can run for transport minister, because it's really literally a joke that the least competent person gets to do the transport job. Because it's a public joke. It's not funny at all, and that shows also that people think like there's not much to do. There's no transformation that we need to do. And in Germany, we have this public transport ticket for 49 euros that you can go throughout the country on the regional trains. And that was a major step and a major success to, to show these alternatives, and to also, do something in this conservative logic to really have this choice that you want to have. And I recently read this article. If you hand out cupcakes to everyone, and then ask them, how do they like their cupcakes? And then they're happy with their cupcakes, of course. And they don't, and if you make it difficult for them to get to healthy fruits and snacks, but it's like in the basement, 2 stairs down or 2 floors down, whatever.
Yeah.
And this is a very nice, the paradox of choice, that it's not, we can also create the real choices that we have.
Yeah.
And so that was very funny with the cupcakes and the cars.
Yeah. It's interesting because the paradox of choice. People have, if you give them the easier choice, the people will go for that. If you don't give them options that are safe, that are easier than having the car, then people will go for the car because that's what they know. That's what has been kind of coded into the society in how you kind of move from A to B. But it's interesting that kind of you went to Netherlands, and Netherlands as it's kind of is what you look up to when you are thinking of how to create urban planning that suits sustainable mobility, promotes cycling, biking from A to B, and Netherlands is completely structured for that. But that wasn't always the case. That change came, if I'm not mistaken, I think in the 70s.
Yes.
Or so. What I mean, when you think of Germany, when you think of UK, you think they are very modernized societies. So what things can we learn that we are, for instance, in your case in Germany, that still need to be implemented to kind of decrease the gap between, let's say, the Netherlands and Germany in terms of sustainable mobility and better urban planning?
I think, first of all, what we have to learn is to put the ideological fight aside. And what they do really well in the Netherlands, they plan well for cycling and they plan well for cars. They don't plan so well for pedestrians, but it is very much also thinking from the perspective of the user-centric approach. And I can tell a funny story, because in the Netherlands, when there is a construction work, and let's say, there's a road blockade and you have to take a detour, and you have to take a very specific detour. What happens in the Netherlands? People don't want to take the detour. They break through another barrier. They cycle on a sidewalk or whatever. What do? Then they adjust the construction work and they adjust the route that people take. The desire line of the cyclists, I would say. What do they do in Germany? When there's a road blockade and whatever, they say, according to the law, it's okay for cyclists to push their bike for 25 meters or up to 50 meters. It's okay for the cyclist to do that. That says the law. And so they just send policemen to stand there, and who's ever cycling on the sidewalk, they get fined 25 euros. It happened to me just 2 months ago, and they were having their,
cameras,
the machine. They had it with them, so you can easily pay by card. It was just, and it just shows that how this different way of thinking is. That the law says it's fine for a cyclist to push 50 meters. We are all cyclists. We know that it's a very big discomfort to get off your bike, push it on the sidewalk, get back on your bike. Takes you extra 5 minutes, even if it's just 50 meters to push it.
Yeah, exactly,
or takes you extra 2 minutes. It's something that you also don't feel like you're seen or you're valued or whatever. And I think it showcases very much that we have to think in the perspective, what's good for the pedestrians, what's good for the cyclists, what's good for the public transport users. It's also not convenient for the public transport users if they deboard the bus and the bus leads directly on the cycling path. Very inconvenient. Yeah. And what's convenient for the car drivers? And at the moment, everything is very convenient for the car drivers. So maybe we also have to, if we want to get equity or like an equal situation, it's of course that we can limit, maybe if you have 4 car lanes, maybe 2 are enough, and then we can have 1 for public transport and 1 for the cyclists. So we have to really think about what is fair and what makes it also better for everyone. If we have most of the trips that are under 5 kilometers and we do them by bike, of course that's also better because it creates less car traffic. Or if we make sure that most people take the bus, it really makes it better for everything and everyone. And I really think the two things is like stop the ideological fight. User perspective is the second thing. And the third thing is look at an ecosystem, as a sustainable mobility ecosystem, but also don't look at mobility just as, people want to be mobile. People maybe don't want to be mobile. People want to visit friends. People want to go to work. People want to go shopping. People want to go to recreational things, and they just have to get there. So it is not a means by itself. It's just the connecting mode of getting you there. And also study shows that, if we make it easier, time is the issue for people. So if you take 1 hour and you can travel, then you just travel further within this 1 hour. Then you move away from the city center because it's more convenient to travel further. But the 1 hour is a thing, or the 15 minutes, what you can reach within 50 minutes. It's very much the time that you have and how the distance you can travel in this time.
Yeah. I mean, it's so, that's a really important point to make about the understanding the user and what are the limitations that there is in place and how to overcome them. Because it's when I think of like cycling or biking in London, or maybe much in a specific case, is that I'm taking a calculated risk. I'm sharing the space with cars. I mean, there are segregated bicycle lanes that I can use, but that's not across the whole city. There are certain parts of the city that are built for that. But it comes with the fear. It comes with I need to kind of limit the risk that I'm going to take. And that's not the kind of the mindset you want to have when you are when you are pondering how should I get to the cafe? How should I get to the party where I'm going to meet my friends? Is it going to take me 30 minutes on the car? Is it going to take me 45 minutes on the bicycle? What is the option here? What is the better option for me? And I think that's the dilemma that I face when looking at my options. Possibly that's the same dilemma that a lot of people face.
Yes, and it's not the Hunger Games, right? It should not be the Hunger Games about whether you survive or whether you make it at the end. And it also shows, thanks for pointing that out, I think this is a very subjective matter. For example, when my Dutch friends come to Berlin, or when my Danish friends come to Berlin, they don't feel safe cycling, because for them it's not what they used to. It's not the safety measures that they have. For example, my Danish friends, they cannot cycle when there's a car parked right on the right hand side, because they are so afraid of the doors opening. Because in Denmark,
of course,
there is not a single the bike lane is always on the right side of the cars. So and it almost freaks them out, and this is things that we can easily change. And it is very much also for the cycling industry. I think it's very much important to also especially address those needs who are not cycling yet, and why are they not cycling yet, and what do we have to provide for them to cycle. And not in an ideological sense, again, to say you have to cycle, it's good for the environment. No, it is just good for yourself. It's good for your well-being. It helps you concentrate better. I mean, there's studies about kids cycling to school who perform better in school, or walking if they walk independently to school, it makes them better. We should very much focus on those who are not cycling yet, and how we can cater for their needs and for their security feelings.
Yeah, that's an important question that I see a lot debated now, where you have a rise in e-bike sales, and there's a debate how bike brands, specifically in the micromobility space and the e-bikes, are addressing the needs of the customers. What is your take on the kind of the cycling, on those specific micromobility companies that are kind of their communications and messaging? Does it need to be refined? Does it need to be changed? Or is this just a pure systematic issue that is kind of it needs to be changed from the top down?
I think it's various things. For when you look at this micromobility sector, I'm happy about it, first of all. So I think we are now in this phase where the cargo industry or the e-bike industry was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So this is now, we are now in this innovation sphere. And first of all, here again, it's like, what do these micromobility companies do? And I mean, the range is vast, from really electrified light electric vehicles up to, solutions for companies and deliveries and so on. So I think it's a very broad field. And it also, in micromobility, according to me, also includes e-scooters, scooters that don't require any form of active mobility. So we also have to differentiate a lot in these fields. But generally, I would say it is at the moment in the stage for the early adopters in general. And I think in regard to that, they do a fairly okay communication because they're addressing the early adopters. And I mean, in some ways, we are maybe progressing more towards the general mass, but I don't see across the micromobility sector, not yet. And for example, also when it comes to sharing mobility maybe has the phase now when it's not only the early adopters, but it became a little bit a mass phenomenon. But still, I have a lot of friends who have never rented a bike on a sharing scheme. So we also have to be, aware that, when we talk a lot to ourselves all the time, it's still a big group out there. And when it comes again to this, now I'm referring to these vehicles who look a lot like cars, maybe, and they have a roof. And I'm really curious how this will develop and how also, when we have what kind of products will come up and how will this really help to get more people in these vehicles. And I'm really curious about it.
What are you referring to in terms of vehicles? I don't quite understand the vehicle
vehicle
reference.
Like a Hopper. Do you know the company Hopper or Podbike, the Norwegian Podbike? They have so they very much look like cars, or like, for example, also the company Ono Motion in Berlin. They have more like mini trucks where you can have
So it's like pedal powered.
It's pedal
Or
powered.
assisted. Right.
Assisted pedal power, but it's still pedal powered, and it's they ride on the bicycle lane.
Right.
And
yes.
So they all ride on the bicycle lane. I'm referring to this micromobility who can still ride on the bicycle lane. At least in Germany. I don't know about UK regulations. Might be different, probably.
I've seen some. Mainly from delivery companies using them. But the cargo bikes are becoming more popular among young families and small businesses as well, moving things around. It's an interesting one because it's a growing. You are looking at the majority of the population that it becomes the target audience for these type of products, because it can be mass produced to the general population because it suits the space of traveling. It's not so much a focus on the sports side. It's really the urban mobility. Do you see? So you mentioned that there's the ideology. Can you expand a bit more about what exactly is in your perspective? Because you are right at the kind of the center of making active changes within the cycling industry, but also put it in policies within the government. What exactly is the ideology that you refer to, and what is stopping people from making more changes, in your opinion?
Yeah, I will get to this in a second. Just let me say one word about sports and urban mobility, because I think sports and leisure and recreational cycling is very much linked to urban mobility, and it can be a good way of starting things. And also, sports cycling helps a lot in giving positive images and, trying to get people active, first of all. And I think a lot of people maybe start with a sport or starts in their free time, and then they also become daily commuters, for example. Sometimes it also works the other way around, as with me, for example. And when it comes to this ideology, we very much have to differentiate between what's good for the society. That's always more like the progressive or the left of the spectrum. And while the conservative are more what's in for me, what's better for me individually. And I think it's also a homemade problem because a lot of the times the activist movement, they were all on this progressive narrative. They were all on, you cycle, it's better for the environment, it's better for us all, it will make all our life happier and better and whatever. And I think I came to the conclusion that in our societies, most of the people are conservative. So the majority is, depends in elections or in phases. But talking about German society, it is very much deeply rooted conservative. And you don't really get far when you always want to make it better for everyone. So it is also very much about this individual gains, about time, about comfort, about also safety and security, important issues. So with this ideological fight, I think also they tried to push things, and they, of course, they went to the Green Party because they were open for this. And in fact, it's also a reasonable thing. It's also a money saving thing to invest in bicycle infrastructure, for example. But our power system, our systemic system doesn't really work like this most of the time. So it doesn't use rational arguments. It uses a lot also what the status quo is. And so it always becomes very difficult if you want to change things because you have the majority who doesn't want any change. And that's why I'm referring towards an ideological fight. If you only are then associated as a topic with one party only, instead of having it an issue that is free of an association or an affiliation with a specific party. Maybe that made it a little bit clearer.
Yeah, it does. It does. I guess I'm not well versed in the kind of the terminology, but it does make it clear. It resonates with the kind of my own experience of politics in the UK. Yeah, it's kind of again, I might just be painting here broad sweeps of my understanding of what politics, but yeah, the conservatives are very much in favor of prioritizing their own without necessarily thinking about the better for the society. But that's also
which can be interlinked, of course, which can be in the best way combined, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, just one problem I see is with trying to implement and a really kind of not say I wanted to say radical, but it's not radical. It's just transformational changes to improve society, improve the well-being of society. Is that you have political parties that sit in government for 4 years, and creating real transformation perhaps requires more time than that, requires more commitment, and maybe they are not prepared to think or to look forward longer than that because it won't get them re-elected into the government. Is that something that rings true in your experience?
For sure. And the thing is also, there is a lot of emotion in mobility. There's a lot of rage when it comes to, I just want to get from A to B. Why are there so many other people in my way? I just want to go visit my friend, And so you can easily play with people and say all these governments, they have been doing so much for the cyclists. Don't worry, we take care of the car drivers. It's the recent campaign that they did here in Berlin. And there was one street closed for cars, and they celebrated as a huge success to reopen it for cars again, to say finally the traffic can flow and we're back to normal and all of these things. And what you're referring to is also this cultural change. And that's also true for transformation. When you look at transformation, there's 3 ways of transformation. You can, when it comes to, let's say, environmental pollution, there's the factory producing something. You can make the pipes, you can put on filters on the pipes. So less particles, less things go out of the pipe.
Exactly.
You can start by a continuity in transformation that you say, we don't have any more fossil fuel powered cars. We have now electric cars. That's a continuity, still requires transformation and change. And the third one then is the disruptive part, when you say we don't do individual mobility anymore. We only do mass and we only do public transport anymore. That would be like a disruptive approach. And of course, if you just want to put filters, you have less resistance than if you want to disrupt the entire system. And therefore, it is very much also a cultural change, a majority, not only in political parties, but also in media. So what are you associated to? For example, when you look at cyclists in Germany, it's more the well-educated people who cycle. It's more we call it like the organic Germans, like the born and raised, no migrational background. And it's less the workers, it's less the people with various backgrounds and stories. And it is a very specific crowd who cycles. It's not the general. It's what I know is true about the UK, that, for example, in the UK, situation is far worse, that it's a lot less women who cycle compared to men, which we have the issue in Germany that it's also less women, but it's a very close gap, not as big as in the UK.
Yeah. Do you think that is to do with education? Do you think that, obviously purchasing a bike is more expensive than buying a pair of trainers. It's more expensive than, is an expense that can be quite substantial. But it doesn't have to. But for the sake of argument, is there some? When I think about it, when you gave that example, what's the thing that comes to mind is the car old status symbol, and you mentioned of the segments of society that cycle the most, and is that because they have already acquired a certain societal status? Is there an underlying reason? Is it education that at schools cycling is not shown as a viable means of transportation or recreation?
I would say it is. And I think it's very much also how we behave as society. Of course, in Germany, it's very much associated. If you made it, if you're successful, you're driving a very expensive German car brand. And it is still a status. It's still a symbol of status. And it is also very much enrooted in the last 60 years or in the last 80 years in our society. It's not always been like this, but media, infrastructure, all these bigger influences very much also, guide us as the cupcakes to where we are at the moment. And I think that requires really some effort to say we want to do things differently. And one example, when it comes to, kids going to school, it's not normal anymore that kids walk by themselves. It's a lot of time that parents drop them off with a car. And it's also in Germany that only in 4th grade, you're almost 10 years old, you get a bicycle exam and you have a bicycle driving license then. And then you're allowed to go individually. And a lot of schools restrict you before that to have kids individually coming without their parents by themselves by bicycle to school. But when you think about routine, you're already 10 years old. You already went to school for 4 years. You already have the routine of your parents dropping you off every day by car. Why would you change your routine then? Because also we know that changing a transport routine doesn't happen so often in general, even with adults. We do it when we change jobs. We do it when we move. But we don't do it every day. We don't want to take everyday mobility choices. And so it is for kids as well. And especially also for kids, it very much depends on the household you grow up in, unfortunately. We're very much socially. Germany is not a country like Scandinavia, where a school or public services provide a lot. It's a lot depending on your household, what schools you go to and how do you go to and whatever. And I think it should very be from first day that we have a system that allows kids to go by foot. They don't have to go by bicycle because ideally they can go individually and they can go by themselves by foot. But we really have to change a system for that. And for example, this requires also parents, this requires political will to do so, to, close the street for cars when there is a school, and to allow them to come by themselves, and also empower kids for their mobility choices. And what's so interesting is in Germany that they say you can only do it in 4th grade because then you're tall enough to look over the cars, and then your brain has developed far enough that you can, that you can survive in traffic. Instead of thinking, how can we change our system to make it better for kids so that they can go by themselves, which it's not set in stone that it has to be like as it is now.
I guess you hit the nail on the head on the fact that education is first the pivoting of mindset of how to better create infrastructure, and then educate parents and children with the benefits that it brings. Because parents in the case of Germany, yes, you can take your license to ride bikes in the 4th grade, but the parents need to help you with that, to make sure that's the right bike, whether it's a safe bike to ride, and they need to trust that the kid is going to get there in safety. Because I think that's perhaps the most difficult barrier to overcome is parents. They want the best for their children, which is normal. So they don't necessarily want to let their child ride to school because you have cars that can kill them. As simple as that. And if there's no infrastructure change, then it's very difficult really to change the mindset of how people see moving in the city, moving from A to B. And really is, in my case, is through to taking deliberate risks, calculated risks, and educating myself about how to be safe riding. And then I'm sure that applies to anyone that rides a bike in London, because I would say it's unsafe. And when you compare it to the Netherlands, I rode in the Netherlands, and you don't need to. That's something that doesn't factor in. You see kids riding to school without helmets, and that's something that you do daily and becomes ingrained in society, so is natural to them.
Yes, and I think also, it's also they on the bike in the Netherlands, they travel less speed. It's just a different flow. While I feel in Berlin, I'm always like, I have to get as fast as possible out of this mess here. While there, I feel like, you're on this bike and you're driving really like this, and it's more like a cruising.
Yeah, that's I guess that's where we have to work towards. When I said we, I say organizations advocating for change, people like you, people like me, that I'm not part of any organization, but I can do my little bit by speaking to my friends, to my family about the benefits that cycling, riding brings, and how to be safe. So it starts to expand a little bit. But having said that, I am doing this at a very, very kind of in a very minuscule way. It's me to my friend, but we need obviously the people in leadership to take action, because they are the ones that have the real power to activate these changes. You mentioned earlier on about the gap between men versus women riding, and UK is even worse. You co-founded Women in Cycling and Women in Cycling in Germany. And I wanted to shift slightly the gears here, because I wanted to understand as well from your perspective, what challenges have you faced as a woman in the industry, but also riding in the streets of Berlin?
That's a very good question. And I think it is also the two aspects very much nailed down also women in cycling, because it is, first of all, for the women working in the sector, and second of all, for the women riding. But it's very much focusing also on this individual needs, but also on the structural changes that we need to take. And I want to start a little bit wider with a so-called wheel of privilege, because when you look at the wheel of privilege, I'm almost as privileged as a white cis hetero man in a leadership position, except the fact that I'm a woman. I have an able body. I'm mentally sane and healthy. And there's so many different ways of discrimination and of privilege that you can face. So first of all, this is a good disclaimer to take. And for me, it is what I experience on the streets is of course harassment, and that, people yell at you, or people, people threaten you when you're on the bike, or when you're like getting off the bike, and when you feel like, oof, I have to, get away as fast as possible because I don't feel safe in this built environment here. And most of the time, of course, when it's more in the evenings and at night. And second of all, when I entered the industry, I was very surprised how few women were there. That was about, 7-8 years ago. I remember I visited my first Eurobike back then in Friedrichshafen. And what really stuck in my head is that I was looking for a toilet, a bathroom. And there was no female bathrooms in this hall, because the female bathrooms were rededicated to male bathrooms. And it was only in every second hall that there was a bathroom for women. And I was really, even there was no queue. And I was really I was shocked to see that. And I was also shocked to see, whenever men have to stand in line at bathrooms, what women have to do all the time, then they find solutions immediately and rededicate bathrooms and whatever. And it was very shocking for me to see the system, first of all, and to see that they were not visible, the women. And it's also, again, also at the trade shows, it's also, what kind of people do you see there? What kind of people are in leadership positions? And especially when you're new, you don't know, is this a leader? Is this an intern? It's difficult to tell sometimes. And it didn't happen to me, but Jill Warren, the CEO of the European Cyclist Federation, told me she is very short. Whenever she goes somewhere and she has a tall intern with her, the intern is always asked whether he is the CEO and not her. And that's really insane. Yeah. And, coming back to the cycling industry, it's not so much also about complaining. And it is very much an industry that works, according to me, a lot on networks and a lot on passion. And I was once attending a session where there were more men called Frank than women. And they said, we don't have a recruiting problem in this sector because we offer lunch rides to go race cycling or road cycling or mountain biking or whatever. And I was thinking wow, this is a big alarm signal, because we only reproduce the Franks here at the moment. And we don't make sure that, there's other input coming in, and there's maybe new target groups that we are at the moment neglecting, and that we have to, we can enlarge our business with as well. So it is very much also a business case to look at, women especially, but to look at other groups who are not on the bicycle yet, and what kind of products would they need. So I think it's very interesting to look at this new target groups. And for me, it is very much on women, because that's something I feel I can do something on. So
yeah, I mean. So first of all, 7 years ago, it's still kind of shocking that 2 years.
Maybe it's 9 years ago. Don't nail me down on the 7 years. So I don't know what year it is. 24. Yeah.
Okay, but we would be in the 21st century. So
yes.
it's still crazy to think that would happen in the 21st century, especially in Germany. I mean, yeah, that's something that it's like what, thinking back, it's in you would probably see more and more in the, I don't know, in the beginning of the century or halfway through the 20th century. I wanted to follow up on what you said, and because I believe that there is a role that also men can play to bridge the gender parity gap, to bring more women into cycling, but more for different ethnicities, more different people from different races, from different backgrounds. In this case, women is, and in that case is kind of really looking at how the kind of the branding, looking at the marketing strategies, looking out to the recruitment processes, and really changing the culture of the companies, because that's perhaps the key transformational aspect, is not having males, men talking down or just not looking at a candidate because she's a woman and they think that she's perhaps not qualified or doesn't have the right experience. I mean, this is the experience that I have of women coming on the podcast and telling me that when they go to bike shops, when they go to cycling events, they are being discriminated, in fact, because they have people telling them, "Are you sure you should be here?" or "Are you sure you really want to purchase this bike?" So there is this systemic issues that in society still exist, and men have an active role to play in bridging this gap. From your experience, what key initiatives do you think are happening or have happened that kind of are changing the landscape and improving the gender parity in cycling, in the cycling?
So let me start a little bit with this men topic, because I really want to stress and highlight this, because it is not what's always mistaken is like the women do something now and they do it against the men, and whether the men should group now in a group. And I always say, no, you can be part of this group. Sometimes maybe we want to have an inner circle or like a safe space where we're only among women talking about cycling, and not talking about us being women, but talking about the different issues and aspects. Because also when it comes to women in cycling, the group is very diverse. It's from policymakers, it's from CEOs, product managers, CSR managers, marketing managers, finance people, but also researchers, journalists, various groups. And I think that has a power by itself. And when it comes to men now, it is absolutely obvious that the men are the majority in decision-making powered positions. And I have a lot of men approaching me and saying, like, what can I do? And how can I help you to become a board member? How can I, and then I invite them to give talks, for example. And also what was very remarkable was also, again, Eurobike. And it was the CEO of Brompton, Will Butler-Adams, who said, where are all the women? I don't see them on the panel. I don't see them here in the audience. There were 4 women out of, 150 at a CEO meeting. Why don't they get heard? And I think that was also powerful that he said that and not a woman said it, because he talks to his peers. And it's sometimes bad that it is like this, and we can, argue about it, whether that is good and that it's also profiling by himself or whatever. I think, people, especially men in this decision-making powers, have to also open up the decision, have to open up the possibilities. And when it comes to measures, I want to differentiate, because it's not so much about fixing the women, but it's also about fixing the system. You can start fixing the women and empowering them. And I'm very much fan of this. I love Rachel Burnside and her campaign about Uplift, where she's mentoring people and, giving them the strength, giving them the information, giving them the network to, take up management position. Perfect. And also when it comes to, exchanging knowledge and, not only coaching each other, but having the journalists, the women getting together and thinking about new images to create, new stories to tell, and giving more different perspective in magazines. Perfect. And what we are trying now at, for example, Women in Cycling Germany, which is a little bit more difficult, is where are the structural leverages that we can do something about? And when I talk about structural leverages, I mean things, for example, as gender pay gap. We don't have equal pays in the cycling sector yet. And in Women in Cycling Germany, we now want to become transparent about, we would just want to have a safe space to talk about salary, so people can also, see about what is in this general field. And then we want to give them things at hand where they can negotiate and find out whether they get the same as their male colleague, because a lot of the time it is not like this. And this is a problem about intransparent structures. You mentioned also hiring. When it comes to hiring, I would say I experience a lot of times the opposite, that shop owners or, production teams or manufacturers or whatever, they come up to me and say, like, we want to hire a woman, because it's starting with the awareness that they want to hire a woman, but they say, we don't find one. Where can we find them? So I think it is very much also this network who I want to work towards, that we also attract new talent. We can be an opening portal where, new talent come in, and we also can direct them, and we can coach them, and we can bring them to the sector, because as I said before, it's very much about networking and knowing each other. And I was at this company, and then I go to this company, and I was at this brand. And if you are new to the sector, you don't understand this. So who teaches you this? And who make so it's also about having a place where you can go to. And especially when it also comes to issues of harassment, when it comes to issues of discrimination, when it comes to also and we all have these biases. Me as an Isabel, I'm more likely to hire another little Isabel than to hire a little Pedro, and that's why when Pedro is in the decision-making process, you are more likely to hire a little Pedro. And it is very much about this inner biases that we have, that we also have to break through. And so I think, and last thing that I want to mention is, I was very much impressed by Sally Middlemiss and the diversity, inclusion, and diversity, equity, inclusion study from the British Bicycle Association. And it very much sparked a discussion about what are easy measures, what can somebody do, what can companies do. And we are very much inspired by this. And we are now on the way to conduct a study in Germany to name the number, because we don't know how many women work in bicycle shops. We don't know how many women are CEOs, and none of the countries know this. And only if we know the numbers, and I'm guessing it's in general overall between 12 and 20% females across all the sector, but that's just my guess. And I want to very validate this with numbers, and want to then set clear targets. We want to double the numbers of CEO by 2030. But how do we get there? How are the structures in the companies? How can we teach the companies? And how can we also help the women to step up? So it's two ways. So still a lot to do.
You clearly have the experience. What is something that companies can actively do to start changing their culture, starting changing their recruitment? Something that is easy for them to do.
First of all, I think best thing is awareness. How is my structure? How diverse is my structure? Does it help me? Okay, setting the scene. And then maybe setting a target, like, why do I want to hire a woman? And do I have the culture that women also feel safe in this environment? And then what I would also say is, it's probably good to not have only one woman on the team, but to maybe aim for more women on the team to diversify, because it's also, it makes it far easier. And what I would also say is that as a company, depending on, of course, what you do, you can also build relationships maybe with schools or with educational programs that go towards you. So if you're in product management, then you go to an engineering school, and you will find that there are less women there than men, but maybe you can also, build relationships and try easy accesses to get women in. There's also initiatives such as Girls' Day in the beginning of April, where you can open your company and you can deliberately invite girls to, find out about what is done on the job. We're now planning a big campaign for Germany to have a lot of bicycle companies participating at this day. And it is very much a long-term thing. It's not so much short-term that it's easy to change things. It requires commitment. And maybe an easy thing that you can do right away is transparent payment structures and stop paying women less.
Yeah.
That's an easy goal.
Very good. Yeah, that's true. Very good. I mean, and I think I need to ask this question because I have also women listening to the podcast, and it's important. I mean, this is important for anyone listening, but what advice would you give to young women aspiring to join the cycle industry, or leaders? What advice would you have for them?
I would advise find a network and make sure that it doesn't have to be women in cycling. You can also go on and build your own network. Find it doesn't have to be women only, but make sure that you have your network. And because it is a sector that very much, according to me, runs on network. So
yeah, that's something that is completely true. I think from my experience, briefly to touch on that, is that I find it's very much a passion driven, like you mentioned, but it's also can be quite closed, and you have to knock at the right doors for opportunities to open that, to have the to build the right network. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to second what you said in terms of the building the network. But that in itself can be challenging if you're studying and you want to get into the industry. If there is not a clear pathway, or you don't see
yes, and I mean, who studies to
more women
to work in the cycling industry? I mean, ask people now, and I mean, I was not thinking about the cycling industry. And I mean, even if I grew up close to Schweinfurt, which is quite a cycling industry hub in Germany, and I was not aware of it. And so it's also a big communication thing again that we have to do. And that's why I say reach out. But yeah, when it comes so much to women, I can only say it's an industry that has a lot to offer. So and I think a lot of women are passionate about mobility or passionate about cycling, and it would be a great fit to have more of them in the sector.
Of course, I mean it creates more opportunities and it leads to more growth. You bring new ideas, fresh perspectives. You create more opportunities, literally, because you have a different type of perspective, and this opens doors to a new segments. It's really a no-brainer, but is part of kind of bridging that gender parity gap is part of also the culture, the systematic issues that we find in society. So that is something that is continued to change. It's a long process, which some companies are doing better than others, but especially the work you have been doing, many other women are doing, is to bridge that and make sure that there's parity within the industry. I wanted to kind of touch on a topic that's has been discussed to some length in the past, but is to do with the cycling relationship with sustainability. I see your reaction. It's telling that the relationship is not quite as harmonious as it should be. And then, I mean, cycling is obviously seen as a key sustainable mode of transport, of urban transport. But I mean, from a sustainability point of view, what are the biggest barriers that the industry is not overcoming to make the industry more sustainable?
I mean, I've been dealing with the topic for more than 5 years now, and I think the biggest problem is that, in fact, to really become sustainable, we have to probably change course of the existing business model, first of all. Second of all, we have to collaborate on, I mean, the business model of, having a new frame every year that has a different color and that has, we have to change product portfolios and have to change life cycles of bicycles, have to change. And when I mean business model is about, is it only the manufacturing, or is it also the renting, leasing, insuring? What are the business models with it? And I mean, I cannot never forget when I first saw swap feeds, and I thought like, this is an interesting model, but will people be willing to pay 20 euros a month? And people are willing to pay it because it's a lot of hassle to get it fixed and stuff. Is this a business model that is already a good case? No. But it's about, when we want to talk about sustainability, I think we really have to have no limits in thinking, and that really probably requires a lot of disruption. First of all. Second of all, collaboration. When it comes to such things as recycled aluminium, I'm a small bike manufacturer and I want to use recycled aluminum, but I have to order, I don't know, tons of it. I cannot reuse that myself. So, or I need a very specific, sustainable material that I just need too much of it. So I have to collaborate with others to make joint, to maybe order it together. And then third, and maybe most importantly of all, it's about digitalization and sustainability, sharing of data, sharing of planning, sharing of, product information, the materials, I think, is very much interlinked. And I think a digital product passport, I'm not really super into, don't ask me any very specific details about it, but as far as I encompass it, it is very much interlinked that I thought it was before. To have all this information available helps also to replace things, to design things differently, to make it reusable, or to remanufacture things, or to bring things back into a circular loop. And it is not so much about, changing the printer paper to sustainable paper in your office. It is about very core things that we have to think about. And of course, this takes time. And I think it's important, and I think it's necessary. And we have to make sure that, that even if the consumer awareness is not big about it, because consumers think, I have a bike, that's better than having a car, which they are true about. I think the industry has to, talk and progress about it, and has to talk about it as well. So I'm very happy to see that, German bike brands are now awarded with the German Sustainability Award, like Riesenmüller. And so they're really paying off for their sustainability efforts. And I think it's very much a communication problem as well, that a lot of things have been done, but they are only within the cycling sector. So nobody in the bigger scope gets to know about it. So we're also not raising the issue very much. And then, it's a curious path, I would say.
I mean, when big companies are recycling their own production of waste and putting that back into production so that they are reusing their own waste, is that, that in itself is a technology that can be shared. Is that one, you mentioned an aspect of collaboration, is that something that, for instance, that knowledge could be shared with other companies? Or because, what I'm thinking is, well, if a company develops a technology that allows them to recycle their own waste so they emit less CO2 emissions, they want a competitive advantage over the competitors, because they can claim, well, we are more sustainable, more environmentally friendly versus our competitor that is not. So that creates kind of a friction. Is that, when you mentioned collaboration, is that what you're referring to in terms of different businesses that within the same industry collaborating with each other, or even
I think
looking
that's different.
outside the industry?
It's difficult. So let's imagine, the image that, or the example that comes directly to my mind is Schwalbe, of course,
Yeah.
So the tire company collecting and making new products out of it, it took them 10 years to develop. And you say they have an advantage. I would say, yes, they have an advantage for environmental aware customers, but financially, they don't have much of an advantage, because it's not that the non-environmental friendly companies get fined or anything, So the advantage could be in a system where we bonus those who are doing good environmentally better, and we malus, or we make it harder for them who are not performing worse. And they invested 10 years. Why should they go ahead and share it with Vittoria or Continental? But what they do is, and I think that's very much family-owned long-term perspective, is say, we do this for our own sake, and to, have the company in 10 years or in 100 years still running. And I'm not sure that they should go ahead and share their formula with the others, because of course, in an ideal world, in 5 years, the market has consolidated itself with the ones who are environmental aware, and those who are maybe not aware, and maybe we lose these other brands then.
Exactly. Yeah.
And other tire companies, don't get me wrong, they started on environmental programs as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's a consolidation, hopefully, in the market, because I also don't think that we need all of these different brands and all of these different products. So I'm not sure. And I love the variety, and I think it is the good thing also about the sector. But I'm really curious to see how this will develop as well.
Interesting. I mean, this leads me to a question that I think is quite apt to this moment in time in the conversation, which is, what is for you kind of where you think are the major tailwinds and headwinds of the cycling industry in the next 5 years?
So I always start with the positive. I think, as I said, we have a diverse range of products and we have a diverse target groups who are not addressed yet. So there is a big opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think it's various ways how we can address them. We have to find, and I think we were fighting a lot to be seen in our diversity as we are as cycling. You can be a mountain biker, the product diversity, there's also maybe sometimes an identity. So you can be a road cyclist, or you could be whatever, an urban mobility enthusiast. So I think that there's a lot to explore as well.
Yeah.
And this will also be a business opportunity for the cycling sector. And also we have big tailwinds from the European level with the European Cycling Declaration, who says we want to double the number of jobs in the EU. That means 1 million more jobs. We want to double the number of infrastructure so people have the safe environment to ride their bike, whether it's for leisure or for commuting. So I think that's big tailwinds and that's big chances. And I would also say digitalization and sustainability is a chance to do things differently. And then, of course, when it comes to the headwinds, it's of course the stocks that we have, and it's of course this negative environment at the moment that people were maybe a little bit too optimistic about how the corona boom will continue. And I'm very much afraid that we will head into the same cycle. So we call it a Schweinezyklus, so a pig cycle. I don't know if this is an English word. So it goes up and down all the time. So you have a boom, and then you think the boom continues, and then you drop again. And so I really hope that we find a way to level this out a little bit and to maybe grow up a little bit as an industry. And of course, diversity. Let me say that if we diversify ourselves, of course, that's also a big tailwind.
There you go. I mean, the key 5 tailwinds which are really fully support because are crucial to the growth of the industry and the development of the industry as well. So I wanted to we touched upon a lot of topics, women in cycling, sustainability, urban planning, micromobility, and so forth. On a more personal note, and this is a question I ask every guest on the podcast, what does success look like to you?
Good question. I think for me, success is very much on people as well. When I make people happy, when people feel safe, and then it's like in a community event or at a Eurobike or at a Velo Berlin, and people feel that things are moving forward. So I can give a spirit, I can, the topics that we set, or, the people that are happy with it. I think that's very much my success, because I feel it is very much the people with whom we drive the change.
Yeah, very good. Very good. It's a great mindset to have in terms of how to face life and how to create connections, make people happy, because that's how you build a network, create friendships, build a career. It applies to anything in life. I've started in the podcast a tradition where every guest leaves a question to my next guest, not knowing who they are. Ooh. And the question, so the question I was left for you is the following: what brands are putting sustainability practices at the forefront of their business?
According to me, it's Riese und Müller, the cargo bike manufacturer, Schwalbe. Those two come to my mind right away.
Very good. So now it comes to your turn. What question would you like to leave to my next guest?
Of course, I will touch on diversity and I will ask the next person, like, what do they do to foster diversity in their company, in their organization? And maybe they can also question this themselves then. Is that already enough or could it be more?
That's a great two-part question. Because most people would say, most people would ask, what are you doing to grow diversity, to have a better representation within your company? But that follow-up question is great because it makes them question what they've done so far and what their plans are if they need to be even better. So great question, Isabell. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. I feel like we could carry on. Maybe for another time. But you have a depth of knowledge about all the topics we covered, and I think people will enjoy listening to the conversation. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Pedro, so much for being on the podcast. And I'm looking forward to see you again for your nice formats that you create. And I very much like this creative ideas also at the end. So thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Right Success. I hope you found Isabell Eberlein's journey and insight as inspiring as I did. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to follow the podcast on your favorite platform and leave a review. It helps us reach more people passionate about cycling and sustainability. You can follow me, your host, Pedro Couto Lopez, on LinkedIn for updates on future episodes and behind-the-scenes content. Together, let's keep exploring the power of the bike to transform lives and communities. Until next time, ride safe.